Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome to the Front Stoop podcast, the last one of the year. And of course, I trailed off a little bit just because life is lifing, man. Traveled with my daughter to Paris earlier this year. My daughter's first birthday, my other daughter, the newborn, her first birthday was on Thanksgiving. We had a little party right around Halloween, of course, then with the family on Thanksgiving Day. And like all the things that come with Thanksgiving, I am wearing my Griswold hat because in true Griswold fashion, that is the kind of Christmas and end of the year I've had. I can't complain really that it was terrible or anything like that because it wasn't. But I'm sure I'm not the only person that tries to make things wonderful for the people around them at our detriment, right? Like nobody's asking us to do this. I'm fully aware that nobody's asking us to do this, but you want to create great spaces for your family and for your kids. And my two other kids are teenagers, and they don't appreciate things as much as it seems like. I should say they don't seem to appreciate things as much as I would hope they would, which I realize is unfair. I don't want to put my hopes on their reactions to things, and I'm working on those things. But I thought it was a good spot for me to reflect on 2025 and really set forth what I want this podcast to be for 2026 and beyond. One of the main things is I realized that in, winding down the year, my wife and I have been on this journey of surrounding ourselves with people that make the effort back to us, right? And I'm sure that many people go through different phases of life. I mean, a lot of people, I know some that still talk to their high school friends, 20 years after high school as if they were still in high school. And I think that's amazing. I used to think that was kind of lame for, to only be friends from high school 20 years afterwards or 10 years afterwards, because it felt like to me that you didn't grow. But I did. I had like a core group of friends from high school, and then a core group of friends from college, and then friends that I met in my professional life. I've been very lucky to find wonderful people in my professional life that have felt like family. I mean, I worked at WGN for a long time, and you make lifelong friends at a place like that, especially the time I was there. But in college I had great friends, and in high school I still have best friends that I've had in high school. Unfortunately, I lost one to COVID a few years back, but I mean, he was my roommate in college. He was a great person. And I will have a podcast that features him a little bit later on next year. But in all of that, like there were certain events going on. My daughter's birthday, that was the 1 year old birthday around around Halloween. We invited people to come to it, and a lot of people this year had other things to do. And you can take that personally, and you can not take it personally. It is what it is. I know certain people struggle with social situations or don't want to, or they're on all the time, and that I completely understand. But then there's like people um, who don't give back what you give them, and I think that was an awakening for me and my wife, and we have talked about this extensively throughout the last few months here of the year. But we realize that we've been doing this subtly throughout the year, but in earnest since the birthday party. And what I mean by that is we realize the people that we have made a lot of effort for over the last year of my daughter Willow's life, people who said they wanted to be a part of our lives, who wanted to meet her, who wanted to be part of her life, just haven't shown up. And that breaks my heart a little bit because they don't show up when they say they will. And I'm not even talking necessarily like coming to visit every other week or buying her. I'm not talking about any of that. It's just about spending time, like, and making the effort, like making the effort to call about her, ask about how she's doing, or me, or my wife, or my family, and so on and so forth. And there are people who have done that, specifically, um, like my twin brother, and it comes to the TV business. He's fantastic. I don't want to say his name because if he ever watches this, he'll be all whatever about it, but he knows who he is. I met him at WG, and he taught me a lot about camera work and everything else. I love him, and he's probably 15 my junior, or my senior, I should say. But he is a fantastic human being, and he has been there for me through lots of things in my life and gives back. And he wasn't one of the people at our party just because they couldn't make it, and that's fine. That's life. I'm not talking about people like him. What I am talking about are people that have been part of your life, and you kind of get to a point where you wonder why you're still friends with them, or why do you still invite them to parties if they never make the effort to show up, or they don't reciprocate that effort. I realize I'm 45. I'm going to be 46 next month, and I have invited people openly to my house for parties over the years. And I realized something this year. And I guess it's something that I have to figure out going forward with the rest of my life. There are people that never invite me to anything of theirs. I invite them to things of mine, and they show up, and they're great, and they're wonderful humans, and we have a great time. But in turn, I'm never invited to anything of theirs. Now, in full fairness, some of these people never do anything like that, to the scale of like a Halloween party or a Christmas party or a Fourth of July party or a party, right? Some people just don't throw parties. And then, you see people that do throw parties, and then you invite them to yours, and then they don't invite you to theirs, and you see it because they post it online, which is, online, whatever. And it's not like, I guess the old me would be mad, be like, what the hell, man? But then I'm like, wait a minute. I guess I don't care, you know? And I guess that's my big thing for the ending of 2025 is no more bullshit, no more begging people to be part of my life. Because to me, I know what kind of life I've created for myself and for my family. And I think it's an excellent, wonderful, and beautiful life. And I'm very thankful for it. And I count my blessings more now than I ever did in my 20s and 30s. Because in your mid 40s, you really appreciate what you have, because you know how fragile it is. I am fortunate that I have two parents that are still alive, that still are active members in my life, that still give me so much that I don't think I could ever fully repay them for everything they've given me, from advice to examples to how to be as human beings, financial help when I needed it, trying to buy a house, need a down payment. Mom and dad were there. So I'm going to try to do that with my kids in the future. But in this year of giving, because we wanted people to really be a part of our daughter's life. And then I realized maybe people just don't want to, and that's fine too. But it just kind of all culminated at the beginning of the culmination was her birthday party that we had in October. So I mentioned that her actual birthday's on Thanksgiving. Well, if you know anything about party throwing and whatnot, you know that people are not going to want to come to a 1-year-old's birthday party anywhere around the holidays. And her birthday squared right on Thanksgiving. So after like November 1st, all bets are off. People are traveling. They don't want to go anywhere because whatever. So we thought we'd move it back. And we also love Halloween. So it was a combination. And it's not weird for us to have a Halloween party. We've done so a bunch of times. And people came. And then people that pretend that they're want to be a part of my life in, you know, text messages, or maybe a phone call here and there, or not a phone call, but like random things that pop up throughout the year. And people have reached out to me during the pandemic who wanted to be a part of my life, to get to know me and my family, all but disappeared. And I guess that's kind of like what I want to talk about, because if you're going to make an effort to be a part of my life, and if I make an effort with yours, then it works back and forth. And now we're all guilty of getting busy throughout the year. And I fully realize that, because that's happened to me with the daughter. But I specifically think about one person in particular who reached out to me, and we became friends, close friends, during the pandemic, right around the beginning of the pandemic. And then up until about a year ago, I would see this person all the time. They made effort. I made effort. We had many dinners together, and then it just stopped. Like basically Willow was born, and then they just stopped being a part of my life. And not because I couldn't make time for them. I'll make time for anybody, even with the kid. We are lucky enough to have mother-in-law that lives next door that watches Willow all the time. Um, and it gave me pause, because it made me realize that person symbolizes what I don't want in life. And there are people, and I'm sure everybody has this, but there are people that pretend to be your friends because you can get them something, or you can get them closer to something, and then they sponge off any um information you can give them, they use you up basically, and then they pretend they don't know you, but they don't want to be mean about it. So every once in a while, you'll get like a superficial text of like, "Hey, what's going on? We should get together, blah, blah, blah. We'll talk soon." And it's like, if you're going to call somebody and text them that we should get together, maybe make the actual date. Like, hey, why don't we get together next week? Does that work for you? That's kind of how that, at least in my opinion. So I'm all over the place, but I basically, what I've come to realize at the end of 2025 is that I'm tired of everybody's bullshit. And I think it's because I'm older and, people want to, like I said, be part of our lives. They will. And I got to let that go. And I think that's the hard part for me, is letting go. Just because, and this is not just friends, this is family too. Like, it applies across the board to everybody that we know, because I realized, I've been married before, and that marriage did not work out. It ended. And then I dated somebody, and I tried so hard to make that work when everything in my body told me it wouldn't. But because I got divorced before, I wanted to double down and not have to go through that again. And that didn't work. Then finally, I met my angel of a wife, who we are imperfectly perfect. I mean, literally, that's what it says on our inside of our rings, right? So we realized what was really important to us. And what's important to us is to surround ourselves with people that give us what we give them, this constant reciprocation. And we are both guilty of, before us meeting up and becoming a couple and then being married, we had people in our lives, and currently still do, that only are interested in themselves. They only come around when they need something. They get upset at us subtly when we don't want to bend to their personality. Let's just say that. That's probably the best way to do that, because historically we've let selfish people be selfish because we're like, well, that's who they are, and, blah, blah, blah. But we got to a point this year, and everything came into focus when you have a 1-year-old and you really are conscientious of how you spend time with people, because you don't want to be away from the 1-year-old, or who you bring into her life, right? Who you want her to know. And, we really realized that they're the people in our lives that don't make the effort for us. We don't really, it's not that we don't want them in their lives, but we're not going to make the effort to have them in our lives. And that kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because there are people that fall into that category that I've known for 15 or 20 years. And I have loved these people. I have spent significant amounts of time with these people on vacations or whatnot. And now they're going through their life thing. And that's what I have to remember. There are people that go through different life things. And if I look back, and if I'm being 100% honest on my particular life struggles, when things got hard for me, I didn't talk about it, and I didn't reach out to people, except for like my very, very close people around me. And what I mean by that is not necessarily, they might not have been my closest friend, but in that time in my life, they were the closest that I interacted with on a daily basis, that now some of them I don't even know. In particularly, there was a woman that I worked with at the old number 9, who, um, when she found out that me and my ex girlfriend broke up, she was there for me every step of the way. She was incredible. She was what I thought a friend should be, right? She made effort. I made effort. And it was wonderful. It really was. I mean, she really helped me out. She like brought me lunch at work, and I have known her previously for years before that, and she was always nice, you know. But things are weird, man. People get weird, and when people feel like you owe them something, then they change their tune. Let me just say that. And this person did. They got mad because I had a steadfast rule that I wasn't going to date anybody I worked with ever again. And not that my girlfriend before I worked with in proximity at WGN, I didn't. She was in the PR industry, but we worked together that way. And I was like, I'm never doing that again, let alone working with somebody at my own business, at WGN. And I said it 100 times. And I was then basically, we were peers, we were equal. We both had a supervisor that we didn't love. I'm not talking about the big boss. I'm talking about the supervisor who kind of controlled things from a digital standpoint. She was difficult to work with sometimes, very controlling. And we bonded in that, and we thrived in that because um, we wanted to show that we were more than what she thought we were. And we came up with these great ideas. And I went on this path, this digital path that I'm on talking to you now. It started at WGN about wanting to do stories outside of what we did. And this is before YouTube Shorts. This is before Instagram was what it is now, when literally you were just posting photos on Instagram. That's when this stuff happened. And it really excited me. I wanted to go and show the best of where people can go in and around Chicago, and we had talked about doing it together. And I just was the one that did it, and that could be that I was the one who was allowed to do it or whatnot. But I did a lot of it on my own. And that pulled me away from our friendship. And then I started dating again, and that pulled me away from our friendship to the point where then she, when I would reach out, would never reach out. And that bummed me out because that happened while I was at WGN. And then, then I met my wife, and then I had an incident where somebody tried to make something that I did look like it wasn't above board. Right. And, I knew that this person was involved in it, and I asked her point blank if she knew anything about it, and she just looked at me and she said, "Oh, no, no." And I knew she was lying, and I can tell by the way she was lying, because basically since that conversation, which was over 4 years ago now, um, I haven't talked to her since. I talked to her right before I left WGN. In fact, the irony in it all is that she helped me with my wife helping. She was at the station the last day I was there as an employee, and I was removing stuff out of my office, and she kind of like helped me walk things out with my wife, and she pretended she was fine. And I haven't heard from her since. Isn't that crazy? So that kind of sums up like what people have done. And I know I am not unique in any of this whatsoever. This is just kind of my personal journal and blog, and I've never really talked about that until now. But that was like the beginning of like what I had to do for myself to best help, heal myself mentally, physically, cost me a relationship. And honestly think, and I'm not, whatever, but I feel like it cost me a relationship because I just wasn't interested romantically in this person, to the point now where they like, unfriended me on Facebook or on Instagram, where I'm like, what the hell? Um, and that has steadily happened throughout the year. Not steadily, it's slowly happened throughout the years, where when you realize somebody has an agenda, and you don't want to believe it because they're a lovely person and they're friends, and then you realize when you start standing up for yourself and what you need, what's best for you, then um you can sacrifice friendships that way. And I guess that's what I've learned this year. And it started with that relationship because I thought that was a relationship I would have for the rest of my life. And I'm sure I've done what I am saying has happened to me to other people. I speak about one of my best friends that passed. We were best friends high school, in college, because he was my roommate. And then he made some like life decisions that I couldn't really get behind, and I couldn't be a part of because I didn't want to sacrifice everything that I had worked for because of dumb decisions he made. It just wasn't worth it to me. And that caused our relationship to suffer quite a bit. We were friends. We just weren't close as like we used to be, but we definitely, I mean, he was at birthday parties and things like that for my two older kids back in the day when we used to do big parties at my parents' house. But that was the beginning of it. And like, I don't know, this year specifically, the end of Christmas night this year, more stuff has happened in the family, where, people assume one thing, and then when you actually talk to them, you hear what they're assuming, and you're like, well, that's not none of what you think it is. Like if you would just have talked to me, you would know that, you know, I paid for this, or I did this based on what was my family's best interest, my core family, and I invited you to it because at that point, I'm not really interested if it works for you or not. I'm more interested in figuring out what works for me and my kids that I co-parent with my ex-wife, and the days that work for us. I get a vacation, I put it together, and then I open it up to the family. That's what I do. Like we find a week that works typically like late July or August between my ex-wife and I, so I can have my two older kids. And then, my current wife and I figure out what's the best date for all of that to work for like a getaway in the North Woods. And then I would open up to my family, hey, we're doing this thing and I would love for you guys to be there. And for years, my sister-in-law would think that that I wasn't including her on the vacation plans. And I explained to her, well, like, why would I include you on those vacation plans? Because I'm trying to do what's best for me, and we're paying for it, And I've gotten yelled at, or I've been accused of not taking into account feelings and all this stuff. And it just made me realize, like, you can never please everybody, right? And people are who they are. And if I expect people to change, that's worse, right? So I've had family members who, and I've talked to this about with my mom and some of the stuff that she's struggling with her siblings. And we basically come to the conclusion, and it kind of all wrapped up for me emotionally and physically on Christmas night, when my some of my family didn't come on Christmas, and they didn't tell us they weren't coming until like 3 o'clock that afternoon, when everybody was supposed to be at the house at 2. So it just bummed me out, like I was upset by it, because it's like, we like, hosting a party is not easy. You gotta clean up the house, you gotta set up all the tables, you set up the tables for the little kids, you make place settings, you make the food, you do all this stuff, to be told the day of that you're not coming, not because of an illness, but because you choose to go somewhere else. Like, it's just insulting. And aggravating, to be honest, so like I sat there, and it was really bummed out, and I didn't understand why until that night. On Christmas night, I'm looking at all the open presents and wrapping paper, that's kind of the little shreds of wrapping paper that are all over the house that you still have to clean up after everything. And and I thought about, like, what was bothering me, and I think it was the finality of all of that. Everything I've just spent the last 10 minutes talking about, from that person I worked with at WGN, through the incident just this Christmas, of people who are selfish, who are looking out for themselves and themselves only, and then expect you to bend over backwards to accommodate them when they finally do have time for you. And my wife is very much in agreement with me about, we just don't want those people in our lives. And I think when you say it out loud and you start doing the things that give you action to protect yourself from those people, it can get lonely really quick, because then you don't see those people, right? You don't see them around, and you miss them because they are your family, or they are your friends that you've known for years or your whole life or whatever. And you realize that you miss them, but then you also don't miss the bullshit that comes with it, and the I mean, I swear, the things that we've been told this year about what we think is best for our daughter, we've literally had people say that that doesn't work for them. I am not making this up. We had a person say, that it doesn't work for them, that we won't let them bring over their dog that doesn't like little kids, and that's selfish of us. I shit you not. This is stuff that we've dealt with this year. People telling us what doesn't work for them when it comes to our newborn daughter. Like that, to me, I was just blown away by the hi there, by the selfishness of said people. And so in those moments and everything else, we realized, you know what? If they want to be part of our lives, this is how they get to be part of our lives. If they don't want to be, then they're not. And of course, all the things happen that you think are going to happen. They come around when they need something, or something big's going on in their life, and they're the first person to tell you about what's going on in their life, and they're last person to ask you what's going on in yours. So it's sad to lose people that I've known for a long time, people that I've known for a short time. As I get older, you just kind of sniff out the bullshit more than ever, and you really understand um what bullshit is and what selfish is, and you just realize you just don't want to be part of it, man. Like, life is too short. I've lost so many people already who are gone, and I think, gosh, like, there's so much crap in the world. Like, why bother with all this BS, right? Like, why? It's gross. And even with my wife and I in our relationship, we've had some difficult times in the last month or so with family stuff. And it has worn us out, and it has worn us very thin. But in that, we've become closer with wearing out, like the old, what doesn't make you stronger, or doesn't want to kill you makes you stronger thing. Um, And it's just amazing when you start putting your foot down and saying no, enough is enough. It's amazing the reaction you get from people subtly, subconsciously, um, how they treat you going forward. It is something to behold and to see. And it's also empowering because once you realize the bullshit that you have taken for years from people or the selfish behavior that you have allowed, and then you stop it or you stop it from entering your home, and then the reactions you get from these people, it's always like they're always mad at you. Like when you were finally like, enough of this, we're not doing this way anymore. This isn't healthy. This isn't what's best for us in our home. And people make it selfish about them, well, then you have every answer that you want. And I guess that's what I'm come back to at the end of 2025. I look forward to shedding all of that because life is too short, you know? And I recently found out a friend of mine, one of my best friends, had a panic attack that he never even told me about. I found out with him talking about it months afterwards because he's too proud. And I know he's too proud because that's who he is. He's always too proud to tell you what's really going on in his life because, guys, it's hard to talk about things, because you feel less of a man, you feel less accomplished when you have stuff that's going sideways in your life, when you do something wrong. I mean, when I got divorced, it was the hardest thing to do was to call my friends and tell them because I felt like a failure. And um, that goes along with like business opportunities or house stuff or whatever, man. It's hard to talk about. So that's what this is for me. I'm talking about it to a screen and an iPhone camera at the moment. But at least I'm talking about and getting it out because I don't want any of this to carry into 2026. So I leave you with this. I do this occasionally, but I do post stories every day from Stories from the 78, almost every day. And I try to find positive stories, try to help people out, try to give people what they need in terms of enjoying the city of Chicago, because I think Chicago is wonderful. And I feel like Chicago is a good example of my personality. Get overlooked from time to time, underestimated most of the time, but in the end, knowing it's the best thing out there, man. And I really do feel that way because I know my true self. I know my wife's true self. And I know that, we've come to the point where like, no, it's a privilege for you to be part of our life because we can be a part of so many lives that don't serve us in the end. And I'm not saying that we wouldn't help people or anything like that. That's not what this is. This is like real relationships that are toxic, and to limit the amount of interactions if they are family, limit the amount of interactions with those people so they don't affect us. That's what we're doing going forward. Whether those people like it or not doesn't really matter because we are in charge of ourselves, obviously, and our daughter and our other kids. And I leave people with this, like, I do post every day, like I said, but if you need somebody to talk to, happy to talk about it right here. Talk about it, air out grievances. Even if I don't know you, I'm happy to talk about it. I feel like communicating and understanding where people come from helps you better be a person to understand people who are going through difficult things and understand their behavior isn't personal towards you. It's just something that maybe you don't want to be a part of. And I think that's the struggle my wife and I have had, is when we've had people who are selfish, we try to accommodate them because we make excuses for them of like, well, they're this or they're that, or they don't have a lot of money, or they're single and they don't understand. But then it's to the point where you're like, enough is enough, man. Like, either you want to make the effort or you don't, on both sides. So that's where we are. So if you need somebody to make an effort for you and you just have nobody to talk to, I'm here for you. Just let me know. Find my information on the website. tombarnaschicago@gmail.com is my email address. It's out there. Barnas is spelled Barnas. Tom Barnas Chicago. You can email me and we can set something up where we can talk just like this. And if you want me to post it, I will. If you don't want me to post it, then I won't. But I am all about transparency for 2026 and beyond. So this is going public as soon as I publish it. So with that, I hope everything that has weighed you down in 2025 is cut loose and set free so you can reach the far reaches of your perceived success in 2026. I think everybody deserves that. I think everybody deserves to feel appreciated, to feel loved, and to not have to completely change who you are to fit somebody else's personality. I think that's a big one. And to really understand who your friends are and to relish those friends, make the effort for those friends, which I have to do better about certain friends. As a guy, sometimes you just get bogged down in work, and work sleep, rinse, and repeat. You want to go to work, you got to get this done, just like to live for the weekend. And I'm fortunate where my work is fun and I love it, but I got to do better about not doing this all the time and enjoy my family more. So that is what I'm working on. But I do plan on finishing a podcast specifically to my buddy Daryl, because I owe it to him to finish that. And I started last year and I didn't work on it at all this year, except maybe like at the beginning of the year. Just because this thing kind of took off on me. So I will get that done in the first quarter of 2026, and that will be one of the things I put out. And I will still do the front stoop, because these are conversations that we have on the front stoop in Chicago. So happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for listening. As always, subscribe to this or go over to Stories from the 78, subscribe and watch that. I appreciate all the love and support. And thank you for letting me just air out a little dirty laundry, if you will. I do love all the people I've talked about, and I don't have any hard feelings. Want to make sure that's 100% clear. I also just got to protect myself and my family. And I'm sure anybody watching who has been in the same situation could understand that, and protect your heart. So with that, happy 2026 and beyond.